Hi guys, this is for Greek mythology at Cal State Long Beach. We are going to be doing video lectures. That way you can access them anytime, even if you're not in the same time zone. You don't have to get up and be really earlier in the middle of your day or whenever it's convenient for you to do this. We will be doing the final exam online through Beachboard, and I will be available through Zoom if you have questions or comments, or if you just want to get away from the gloom and doom and the binge and cringe news cycle. You can come into either class. I have a 9:30 in the morning and I have a 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, Wednesday. So I will be available through Zoom, and I will send out the codes a little before that. Okay? Today I would like to start on the Underworld. We're going to see if we actually get to the Underworld because we still have to finish the Divine Masculine. All right. Also, please be aware I'm not editing these, so my cat may come through. I may answer a question to a family member, or something else weird may happen. Who knows? But you're going to see all the flubs in all of their glory because I don't have time to edit all of these things. Editing takes forever. So please forgive all the flubs and the uhs and the whatnot, and I will try not to do too much of that uhing. I don't know. We'll see. See, there it is again. The first thing I want to do is get back to the Divine Masculine. We are going to start with a pair of characters who are actually rather kind of supporting characters in much of the stories. This is Castor and Pollux. Sometimes the Pollux is called Polydeuces. That is the Greek version of his name, and Pollux is the Roman shortened version. They are twin sons of Zeus and Leda, and Zeus disguised himself as a swan to sort of get Leda's attention. And apparently they did the nasty. I don't know how you do that with a swan, but it's Greek mythology, and we've seen stranger things. Leda is also having sex with her husband a little bit later on that same day, and he is the king of Sparta. So when Leda bears her children, she actually lays an egg or two with Castor and Pollux inside. One of them is mortal, the son of the king of Sparta. One of them is immortal, the son of Zeus. It's awkward. Helen and Clytemnestra are their sisters, so you're going to, if you recognize the name Leda, that's probably why. Let's see here, make sure I get everything in here. They share they share the immortality between them. The brothers, like I said, one is mortal, one is immortal, but they stick together and they are willing to share that immortality so that neither one of them truly has to die. In the Iliad, they both get shot and die, but one of them goes to Mount Olympus, the other one goes to the Underworld, and every day they switch places. So unfortunately, they're not together, but they see each other on their way up and down. And every other day, one is on Olympus, one is Underworld. The next day, the other one's on Olympus, the other is in the Underworld. You get what I mean. Later in the Odyssey, Homer explains this. They were patrons of Sparta, but they had really important temples at Athens and Delos. And they were later on became patrons of the Roman equestrian class. The Roman equestrian class is really important because they provide the cavalry to the Roman army. And so they have special privileges and they tend to be very wealthy. Castor and Pollux, generally, like I said, play supporting characters. They go on lots of great adventures, though. They're in the Caledonian boar hunt. They take part in Jason and the Argonauts, and they are in Troy. They're part of the Trojan War. In one adventure, when their sister Helen gets abducted by Theseus of Athens, they go and get her. One of them, in a different story, one of them meets his end when they go out to steal some cattle, and they end up stealing a couple of young ladies instead. Unfortunately, these particular young ladies were betrothed to their cousins, and said cousins wanted their brides back. So a little kerfuffle battle ensues, and one of them gets killed, unfortunately. Castor dies, and they end up trading places every day, so that every other day one of them is alive and the other one is dead. Castor and Pollux. We're going to move on to Achilles. Achilles is going to take a minute because he's got quite a lot of stories around him, being quite the warrior, and ancient Greece being very much a warrior culture. Achilles is born to Peleus, who is mortal, and Thetis, who is a Nereid. So he's kind of half divine, but not quite immortal for him. So his mother dips him in the river Styx, and I think we've discussed this briefly. His mother dips him, holding him by the heel. So he is mortal on his heel, therefore the Achilles heel, right? His fate is to lead a glorious life, to always be remembered, but he will die young. And his mother wants to avoid that fate. So she places her son on an island that's kind of out of the way, and she disguises her son as a girl, trying to keep him out of the training and stuff for warriors. And so hopefully he won't learn to use a sword, and maybe he can avoid his fate. You can never avoid your fate in Greek mythology. Once you have a fate, it's going to happen. And as you try to avoid it, you're probably going to run straight into it. That said, by some accounts, also he was educated by Chiron, and we're going to look at Chiron in a minute. So Achilles is hanging out on the island when the Trojan War breaks out, and Agamemnon knows he's going to need Achilles in order to defeat the Trojans. So he sends Odysseus, right, clever Odysseus, to get Achilles out of there and to bring him on board with this whole thing. Eventually, Achilles agrees to go, and he leaves his son Neoptolemus behind while he goes in search of glory and gore and whatnot. The first line of the Iliad is rage. Goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles. And in fact, the Iliad is more properly known as the Rage of Achilles. So Achilles goes off to Troy, and he plunders and whatnot as they get to the coast, like you do when you're a warring people and you're at war. You plunder and whatnot, and he gets 2 girls. And I was slightly off earlier in my version of this. He gets 2 girls as booty, Briseis and Chryseis. He keeps Briseis, and he gives Chryseis to Agamemnon, since Agamemnon is really in charge of this whole charade. But Chryseis' father wants her back. Remember, Chryseis' father is a priest of Apollo, and she is also a priestess of Apollo. Her father offers a ransom. Agamemnon does not give her back, and this pisses Apollo off. So Apollo then sends a plague on the Greek troops. Apollo is really on the side of the Trojans anyway, so no skin off his back. The Greeks are now dying from this plague. Agamemnon eventually lets the girl go, but now Agamemnon wants Briseis, right? Achilles' girl. Achilles doesn't want to let her go, but Agamemnon forces the issue, and now Achilles is all but hurt and pissed off, and he sits in his tent and he pouts for a very long time. All of the Greeks are constantly trying to get him to fight. Patroclus wants him to fight. Odysseus wants him to fight. Menelaus comes in and tries to convince him. Agamemnon is constantly trying to convince him. He won't let the issue go. He is holding a huge grudge here. So Agamemnon has Briseis. Achilles is pissed off and refuses to fight. And now, even if the plague has been lifted, the Greeks are losing people because Achilles isn't on the battlefield. And so the Trojans are now racking up wins in battle. How unfortunate. The Trojans gain confidence. The losses increase on the Greek side. And the war is not going to end any time soon at this point. Eventually, Agamemnon relents, but Achilles continues to hold a grudge. Eventually, his friend Patroclus convinces Achilles to let him use Achilles' armor. Right now, remember, Patroclus is, in theory, a friend, but I would venture to say that given Achilles' reaction to his death, he is more than a friend. Patroclus goes out in Achilles' armor, and it works for a minute. The Trojans freak out a little bit, but then Hector sends a spear going towards Achilles, but it's not Achilles, and Hector dies. Achilles rages again, or still, whatever. He's pouty and he's pissed. And so he's sitting there, well, my friend is dead. There are games held in his honor. There are feasts given, etc., etc., etc. His mom eventually convinces him to go onto the battlefield in new shiny armor that she gives him, because remember, she's immortal. He heads out because he's still pissed about the death of his friend, really probably a lover. He goes out there and engages Hector in one-on-one battle. Now, why this is such a grudge match for him, I am not sure. It's battle, it's war, people are going to die. That's why you're there, is to kill or be killed, right? This was the whole point. Nevertheless, he goes into one-on-one battle with Hector, who is a prince of the Trojans. He is the son of King Priam, outside the battle walls. And of course, Hector dies because it's freaking Achilles. So Hector dies. Achilles is still not satisfied. He takes Hector's body and he lashes it to the back of his chariot and runs it around the citadel for like 3 days. Ridiculous. Apollo, appalled by this behavior, keeps the body of Hector intact. So even after 3 days of being dragged behind a freaking chariot, his body is still intact and perfect looking. Unfortunately, Achilles will still not relent and still does not release the body. It's a really big deal in the ancient world if you don't get proper burial rites, or your body is not cremated properly with the proper prayers and whatnot. If you are stuck, you could be stuck here as a ghost for all eternity, wandering around in a place that you're not supposed to be, and that's a horrible fate. So the fact that he will not allow Hector to be buried is actually quite a big deal. Priam, Hector's father, eventually leaves the citadel. He dresses as a beggar. He goes to the Greek camps. He is disguised by Apollo through like a fog. He goes to Achilles' tent and begs his case. Achilles finally relents and gives the body back. Finally. Priam is then able to bury his son appropriately. Later on, Achilles is killed in the Battle of Troy because, of course, Paris catches him on the heel with an arrow. And again, this is going to be a grudge match, right? This is Paris getting revenge for Hector because he was killed, while Achilles was getting revenge for Patroclus, who was killed in battle because he was wearing Achilles' armor. This whole thing is ridiculous. And it's right up there with the old story of the Hetfields and the McCoys in American folklore. This kind of tit-for-tat eternal vengeance is stupid. Anyway, it's all through history and it's all through mythology as well. So Achilles finally dies. This is not actually in the Iliad. It's part of the Homeric hymns, part of the bits and pieces that we see constantly when we read all these other little bits of hymns and whatnot and other authors' stories. So he does get killed by Paris, and he goes down in a flame, a ball of glorious flame, and people remember him. But he dies young, as he was fated to do. Odysseus, when he goes into the underworld, sees Achilles, and he's, well done, and Achilles has to correct him and say, no, it sucks down here. And if you can live a long life, even as a pauper, living a long life is better than being stuck in Hades. All right. Chiron. The car actually has nothing to do with it. Apparently the car is called Chiron, and I just thought it was a really beautiful car. I thought it was a little different looking. I'm not even a car person, but I thought, wow, it caught my attention. So there you go. Centaurs, in general, were considered barbaric. They are kind of our animalistic primal side. They are violent, they are lusty, they are quick to react in anger. But Chiron is a different story. Chiron is a very different centaur. He is the son of Kronos and Philyra, who is a nymph. Kronos was in horse form when he was with Philyra, so when she gives birth to her son, he is half horse, and she is disgusted by this, and she orphans him. Chiron, the baby Chiron, is then found by Apollo, and Apollo teaches him. Artemis also teaches him. She teaches him archery, so he becomes kind of the archer par excellence in the mythology. This is also partly the reason why Sagittarius, the zodiac sign, is associated with archery, is because the, Sagittarius gets associated with Chiron as well, a little bit. He is associated in stories, like I say, he said he's a supporting character, or maybe I didn't say it. He is a supporting character, but he pops up everywhere. See, he's associated with the stories of Asclepius, the healer, Theseus, Jason and the Argonauts, Achilles, Peleus, Perseus, and Hercules, among others, including Aeneas later on in the Iliad, or not the Iliad, the Aeneid, under Roman control, or under Roman culture. There we go. Let's see here. He ends up dying because Hercules stings him with an arrow. Now, some stories say that the arrow had the blood of a hydra on it, and therefore the wound would not heal. Some stories say it was a poison that Chiron himself had made because he was in herbalism and whatnot. But under any circumstances, this poor immortal guy is now wounded by this arrow, and he cannot heal the wound, so he is perpetually suffering. Heracles trades Chiron's immortality to gain the life of Prometheus. So remember, Prometheus sacrificed himself to give humanity fire, but then he was chained to the rock, perpetually reliving having his liver eaten out by an eagle. Hercules convinces Zeus to let Chiron die and give Prometheus his normal life back, or normal immortality back. So Chiron is eventually released from his pain, and Prometheus is eventually released from his rock. Thank you, Heracles, who theoretically started the whole thing, but solves it in some way, shape, or form at the very least. All right, that is going to be it for the Divine Masculine. We're going to get to some of these guys again. We're going to see them in more detail under the heroes. We're going to look at Jason, and I think Perseus as well, hopefully. All right, so now we go to the Underworld. All right, finally getting to the Underworld. Of course, it's not that simple. There we go. So we have Hades, right? The Underworld is called Hades, but it's also a guy. So remember, he's the brother of Zeus and one of the original 6 Olympians, the son of Kronos. He also took Persephone. We talked a lot about that while she was hanging out with her friends and whatnot. He is called the Invisible One. He has a helmet of invisibility, which gets used occasionally in mythology, and his name is likely related to the root word of the unseen. He also goes by the name of Pluto. The root of that means wealth. An easier way to talk about things under us is also as a source of wealth. So we're looking at precious metals and grain and things like that. He's also called Zeus of the Underworld, which is really interesting. But it does give us an idea of kind of his absolute power and the size of his kingdom. And it gave people another way to talk about him without actually naming him. He is generally pretty passive when he's in a story. He's kind of just hanging out in the room, making sure the shades don't try to escape. But he can be pretty cold and calculating. He doesn't let anyone cross the rules, except in very rare instances. Kind of like death itself, right? Not necessarily aggressive, but not going to let anybody get away. he wasn't focused on punishing a lot of people, except those that who did receive punishments. The few that did were forever sad. Sisyphus, who was found guilty of hubris, is forced to push a stone up a hill only for it to roll back down, and we're going to look at that in a little more detail in a few. Sorry, that's the bolt to my door. People going in and out. Really? Oh, okay. So he has to roll this rock up and down. Another character named Pirithous was forced to sit on a chair of forgetfulness because he tried to hook up with Persephone, and Hades wasn't having that. And then we also have Asclepius, who was killed by Zeus for bringing people back from the dead, and apparently Hades had a hand in that as well. Next, we're going to look at the place. So Hades, the place, is rather dreary. And in early versions of the afterlife, that's about it. It's just one place that's really sad and dank and dark and icky. Very rarely does someone end up tormented, and no one got to go anywhere really cool early on. Eventually, ideas about rewards, specifically being rewarded for remembering the dead, were included, but it wasn't like a party or anything. It was just a little bit better. If you died and you were a good person and remembered the dead and your kids remembered you, you could go to the sunny fields of Elysium, or the Elysium Fields. Whether or not your kids made that effort was not a matter of choice, but part of Greek religious life. And it was a sacred duty to do that, to remember your loved ones, to remember people who passed. And much like today, you weren't really allowed to say anything bad about them. You couldn't say, oh, thank God that guy died. He was kind of a jerk. Once someone passed, you were supposed to say nice things about them and help them out in the afterlife as much as you could. And hopefully that way, people would do the same thing for you. That way you would be remembered in the afterlife, and people would leave wine and whatnot for you to drink as well. At least that was the hope. Next, we have the queen of the underworld, and we've talked about her quite a bit. She was also quite stoic in the stories. But if you were going to get past Zeus, if you were going to get anything from him, you had to get through Persephone. So Orpheus convinces Persephone to let him bring Eurydice back, right? Don't mess with her. She is an ancient chthonic goddess, connected to the underworld, and later became Demeter's daughter. So her connection to the underworld goes way, way back. We also have Hermes. Hermes is a chthonic god as well. He is Zeus's messenger, but he's also the guy that helps bring souls to the underworld. He helps them find their way so they don't get lost. And occasionally he tries to help them out if he is ordered to do so by Hades and or Persephone. His role as a chthonic god goes way, way back as well. He bridges that divide between the living and dying because he also functions as a fertility god sometimes. Remember the Herms? We saw those with the phallus sticking out of it, right? Anytime you see a phallus, it's a fertility symbol. But he's kind of the god of the liminal places, those places in between places. So if you think about a doorway, that's very much literally a liminal place. So he helps you move between one place and another. In this case, very often between living and dying. But remember, he also hangs out at borders with the Herms. He's a god of trickery as well. So kind of that misdirection. He can do that. Let's see here. We also find in the underworld Charon, who was also a guide of sorts. Hermes would get you down to the river Styx, but then Charon got you across the river Styx. And sometimes another river he worked on was the Acheron, but not as much as the River Styx. River Styx is much more predominant. But the rivers divide the worlds of Hades and Earth. He was the brother of Thanatos and Hypnos. He originally just kind of looked like an unkempt sailor, kind of rough, dirty, long, unkempt beard, uncombed. But later in antiquity, he becomes a little nicer looking, very little. He's still very rough around the edges, though. And he's supposed to have a beard that's uncombed and dirty even then. Today, we tend to see him in the way I have him pictured, which is really more like Thanatos, the embodiment of death. But again, modern mythology or modern art and modern ideas of this have kind of merged Thanatos and Charon as well. If you had to cross the River Styx, you really needed to pay him. So when people died, very often they would put a coin in their mouth to give to Charon so that he would ferry them across. If you did not have the money, you would end up standing on the wrong side of the River Styx, tormented, kind of just a haunting ghost, not really sure what you're doing or where you're going, but definitely not happy. Next, we have the shades in the underworld. There's not a lot of detailed information about these guys, but when we see them, they seem desperate. They wander kind of aimlessly and sad, like they want something, but they don't know what. Homer called them drifting and listless spirits. If you think about it for a second, it seems obvious that Hades is the largest kingdom, forever adding souls and very rarely losing any. Plagues don't bother Hades. It's not like people weren't going to be sacrificing to him all of a sudden. In fact, when people died, that's when you got sacrifices if you're Hades or Persephone. So things like plagues or anything where a lot of people were dying were perfectly fine with him. Odysseus in the underworld. So remember, Odysseus pissed off the god of the sea, Poseidon, while he was trying to get home. It's a bad thing to do if you're a sailor, piss off the god of the sea. But there you go. So in order to figure out how to get home and how to appease a Poseidon, he has to go see Tiresias, the blind seer, right? The blind prophet. Unfortunately, at this point, Tiresias is dead. He is told by Circe, Odysseus that is told by Circe that he has to go to the underworld. He has to dig a trench, give libations of milk, honey, and wine and barley to the dead, and swear that he would sacrifice to them when he got home with massive, pyres of animals and whatnot, remembering them. He has to take with him to the underworld a sheep and a black ram and sacrifice those. So when he has to get there, he has to dig a trench. He has to then do the libations to the dead and fill the trench with the blood of the ram and the sheep. All right? When he gets there, he has to once the dead realize he's there, they start swarming around him, and he has to kind of keep them warded off with his sword. I'm not really sure what good a sword is going to do him against shades, but apparently they found it threatening, and they stayed away. He has to keep the blood until he can talk to Tiresias. Now, it turns out that Tiresias actually had some sense of self, which was a gift from Persephone when he went down there. He continued to have perfect sight, not physically, metaphorically, prophet-wise. So he continued to be able to do that even while he was down there. Tiresias finally comes to the trench. He drinks some blood, and he's able to tell Odysseus how to get home. Once that is done, Odysseus finally has the blood or has the opportunity to talk to other people. He ends up talking to his mother. He ends up talking to a lot of the women who have lost people, which is really interesting that the women get a voice in this chapter. He also ends up talking to a lot of the heroes that fell at Troy, including Achilles. And remember, this is where Achilles tells Odysseus that he would rather be, a farmer on somebody else's land, farming for his entire life, for a long life, rather than dying young and glorious, because it sucks down there. All right. So far, so good. So what does the underworld look like? There are many details that get revealed throughout the literature, but there is no cohesive whole picture, and the details are often conflicting. We know it's dark, we know it's dank, and there's no joy in the earlier ideas. It is joyless. Multiple rivers run through it, but their locations are unclear, and their relationship to the river Styx is also unclear and changing. Perhaps asking for a clear geography of the underworld is too big a question to ask because there's way too many answers. And every hero has to enter in a different way. They have to access different parts. Odysseus doesn't go entirely into the underworld. He kind of hangs out on the edge of it. But even that is kind of nerve-wracking for the hero. Some answers are a little bit clearer, and the theologies of the afterlife are constantly shifting and changing. And those theologies become a little bit more developed as time goes on. The first place that does get pointed out is Tartarus. This is an abyss of a place. This is where the Titans are kept, where souls can be judged, and the really, 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 really wicked go to stay for eternal torment. This is universally referred to as gloomy, and its human residents are tormented each in their own unique way. The first notorious resident that we talked about earlier is Sisyphus. He was the king of Corinth, but he was a tricky guy, and he didn't respect the gods or the natural order of things, and that is hubris. His crimes begin with snitching on the gods, including snitching on Zeus, who then ordered Thanatos to grab this Yahoo and chain him up. Unfortunately, Thanatos is apparently not very bright, and Sisyphus starts asking Thanatos how the chains work. How does that work? How do they chain me up? Is this really going to last forever? Can you explain it to me? Can you please show me how these work? And Thanatos shows him how the chains work, and then he chains up Thanatos. Awkward, because then people stop dying. So he escapes Thanatos, and then when he gets brought back by Ares, literally drugged back, he pleads with Hades and Persephone because his wife was not doing the appropriate funeral rites or mourning him correctly. This, of course, was by his own plan. He had told her not to do anything, but the crocodile tears worked, and Persephone let him go as long as he promised to return immediately upon correcting his wife's problem. Of course he did not return, and he lived for a while topside. He was then literally dragged back by Hermes back to Tartarus, and that's when Zeus got involved. Zeus devised a special form of punishment for him. Again, forever would he struggle to carry or roll this giant boulder up a mountain. And then once he got almost to the top, the boulder would fall and roll back down, and he would have to, again, struggle to get it to the top. Next, we have Tantalus. He is also in Tartarus, a very famous prisoner. Tantalus was a king, and he thought he could pull one over on the gods. Again, hubris. He was invited to dine with the gods and thought to himself, you know what? I bet that they are so dumb that they could eat human flesh and not even know it. So what did he do? He cut up one of his sons, Pelops, and he boiled him. As the gods came in, they eventually figured it out. Somebody did accidentally eat the shoulder of Pelops, but that got replaced by gold, so you know.
Sweet Jesus.
Yes?
He cut up his son?
Yeah.
Someone ate his shoulder?
Yeah, I forgot who, but somebody ate his shoulder.
All right. Okay.
You want to sit down?
Yep.
All right.
This is a good story.
That is my sister Caroline. I guess she will be joining us for a few minutes.
Hello.
All right.
Tell us more.
We got to make this interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, he boils his son. He serves it to the gods. The gods do eventually figure it out. They bring the boy back to life because they can do that. However, they were really pissed. And so what he ends up doing is they put him in Tartarus, and he will be forever thirsty and hungry. But every time he dips down to get a drink of water in this pool that he's standing in, which is fresh and clear and beautiful and cool, he will stoop down to get water, and the pool of water will sink below him, just below where he can get anything. And there will forever be a peach or a piece of fruit, ripe and beautiful and plump and juicy. But every time he reaches for it, it will kind of be pushed out of his reach by the wind.
That's the worst.
I know. It's tragic. Another story says that he tried to steal ambrosia from the gods. And of course, ambrosia keeps them immortal, young, and beautiful.
You don't take that from the gods.
No, you don't. That's awkward.
No.
So apparently that's a really bad thing to do, and that's the other story of why he ends up in this kind of awkward position of being forever thirsty and hungry. Mm-hmm. All right, Ixion. Ixion was the king of Lapiths and had an eye for Hera. He was really keen on her, I guess, and he tried to seduce her, which is a really bad idea. Zeus tricked him into having sex with a cloud.
Because that's normal. That's a thing.
It's a thing. I'm not sure how it worked, but there you go.
Okay.
And from that union came the centaurs, which also makes sense.
Yeah, because horses are in clouds.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't know. As punishment for this, he was strapped to a giant wheel that eternally spins. So there you go. There are other residents, but they're not nearly as interesting as these three.
Residents of where?
Tartarus.
Is that where tartar sauce came from?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Just wondering.
Okay, I understand. Maybe beef tartare.
Tartar.
Yeah.
Shoulder. Disgusting.
Ooh, so gross.
Can't.
Okay, but that's okay because we're going to go to the Elysian Fields now.
Oh, nice. Isn't that where the Dodgers play?
Is that where I thought that was Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
I guess if you're...
Isn't that Elysian Field?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know anything about baseball. Me either. I already talked about it above briefly. During the Greek period again, it was just kind of a sunny place. It was a good place to go. But this gets developed later on in the Aeneid, which is Roman, right? Virgil is not a Greek. He is Roman. And the Aeneid is really kind of bad fan fiction of Homer, for Homer, from Homer. I don't know. I hate the Aeneid. So he gets a little more detailed. It's a place for men. Women don't get to go there. Men who go there specifically are warriors who were brave and honorable in battle. And really interesting, in the Aeneid, It also includes a possibility of reincarnation. So generals and soldiers are out there and they can go to this particular place if they want to return to the living so that they can be born again onto the world.
Interesting.
I thought so. I never heard that before until I read the Aeneid.
I've never heard that.
There you go.
I'm glad you read it because I wouldn't get through it.
I barely got through it. I was pissed off all the way through.
Wow.
What? He was ripping off Homer. It's really just a retelling of the Odyssey.
Rude.
That's what I said.
He should have been turned in for plagiarism.
That's what I was saying.
Just saying.
Nobody listens to me. Dionysus, he's so much fun.
Oh my God. He is like a favorite.
He's totally a favorite.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. So he is the son of Zeus and Semele. He is born of Zeus's thigh, but that's actually his second birth. Because remember, Semele insists on Zeus showing her his full glory. He does.
His full glory.
Oh, yeah.
Like his full Monty.
Including the full Monty,
Wow.
but his full glory as a god.
Oh, okay.
And she ends up like burning alive.
Because it's so glorious?
Because it's so glorious.
Wow.
And then Zeus is kind of born then, and he grabs the fetus and puts it in his thigh to hide him from Hera.
Like you do. I carry stuff in my thighs. Like things I've eaten.
Anyway, like that cake last night.
Shut up.
All right. So anyway, he is born again from Zeus's thigh, which makes him kind of a god, a dying and rising god right there, which is kind of an archetypal theme throughout mythology. You get Osiris and Odin, and even Jesus falls into this archetype. He is the god of wine,
Yes.
vines,
Yes.
revelation,
Divine madness and the eternal party. Sorry, I was excited.
That's okay. He's a much more mystical than just a regular party. So I would put him into like Vegas, but it would be kind of Vegas, but mixed in with a little bit of like ayahuasca or
Being at a rave and totally rolling.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. I'm going to trust you on that one. I've
Okay.
never been to a rave.
Well, I did. I heard.
His followers were the Maenads and the Satyrs. The Maenads were famous for their divine madness when worshiping Dionysus. And they also gave blood offerings to him, and that's where some of the stories about tearing apart wild animals and sometimes children come from. But remember, that was from a play written by a guy about secret rites that he wasn't allowed to see. So he got to let his mind go, his imagination go wild.
Just made shit up.
Kind of.
And then it became historical.
No, it became part of the mythology of Dionysus.
Mythology. Right, okay.
It's all good.
Sounds kind of biblical. Oh,
They didn't tear apart wild animals in the
I
Bible.
know, but I'm just saying a guy writing things down that he didn't really get to see.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole can of
Okay,
worms.
yeah, that's a worms.
That's a can of
worms
worms,
in a
yes.
can.
Oof. But either way, he is a sort of bridge between the living and the dead. This kind of divine madness and the fact that he is born multiple times over. So we have, for example, after his mother dies and after he is finally born from Zeus's thigh, he goes back into the underworld to find his mom, to save her, because he's a good son.
That's good.
So he goes into the underworld. He convinces Persephone to let Semele go, and he brings Semele back to the living world. And the story goes that he swam with her up through a big lagoon and was again kind of like baptism would be another rebirth for him. And then Semele gets to be divine. Yay!
Yay, Semele.
Yay! He is closely tied in with the Orphic rites as well, because remember, Orpheus died because he encountered the Bacchantes, the Maenads, and he was not celebrating, so they tore him apart. In some areas, he is also identified as the son of Zeus and Persephone. This also connects him to the underworld, and he is sometimes identified within the Eleusinian mysteries of Demeter and Persephone as an alternate son or an alternate husband for Demeter.
I was just reading those mysteries last night.
Were you?
Yes, the Eleusinian mysteries.
Did someone die?
I died.
You died.
Yes.
Oh, it was that bad.
No, I'm lying.
Oh.
I was not reading those last night.
Well, I know because we don't know anything about them.
Wow.
Sorry.
Sometimes living with you is really hard.
They're the mysteries. They're secret. And they kept the secret. First rule of the Eleusinian mysteries: no
Do you
one.
guys have any idea what it's like living with this person? Continue.
Oh, thank you. Remember, you're here by choice.
Wow.
Ouch. So either way, he is directly connected to life and death through multiple things, including Semele and Demeter. All right. That is our fun trip through the underworld.
It was super fun.
It was. I thought it was
I
good.
heard you talking about Hermes.
Hermes.
Yeah, Hermes. He makes the bags, the Birkin.
Hermes makes the Birkin bags.
Yes.
That makes sense. Hermes is a god of travelers.
There you go.
Birkin bags are huge.
Boom. I just linked something from there to here.
Where is that? Where are they made?
France.
Oh.
Hence Hermes.
Oh, sorry.
God.
My bad. All right. I will see you guys next time.
It was fun hanging out with you guys. I hope that you weren't too annoyed by me.
Never.
You're okay.
What?
Nothing.
All right. I'll see you later.
See ya.
See you guys.
Have a good weekend.
Absolutely.